Hi, Robin. Let me know when you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Perfect. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Sounds like it's been kind of a busy season for you. Does work get
Yeah, the
extra
end of the
busy this time
year.
of year?
The end of the year is always a bit busy for us.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we were able to meet today. So, what would you say are maybe your main things that you'd like to focus on today? The things that you feel like would be the most productive or helpful to work on today?
I think we started last time around with tongue twisters.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we could do the same.
Absolutely. I remember some of them were pretty tricky. I was trying to incorporate specific sounds into that we've been working on.
Yup.
But what I also noticed though is that occasionally as we were going through, we found other sounds that we went, oh, we didn't expect that one to be a challenge. But I was really excited that we found some other sounds that were a little bit tricky. And a lot of the time, I'm not sure that it was the individual sounds. I think it was more the combination of sounds, right? That we were finding combinations because individually we've done really well with the individual sounds, but then sometimes it's we will put things together and we go, oh, this consonant cluster is tricky, or when we have this consonant by this vowel, that's tricky. So I was really excited to find some more of those combinations that were a little bit tricky. So let's start first off with one working on the stop plosives. So we're going to be working on getting that air moving, getting the air popping through the lips as we're starting here today. So the first is Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Peter Piper picked a peck up of pickled pipes.
Peppers. Yes, it's a little bit
Peppers.
long. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
That's right. Yes.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Good. And let's
Peter
try to speed
Piper
it up.
picked a
Yes.
peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Pickled
Pickled
peppers.
peppers. Yes. Peter
Peter
Piper
Piper
picked a peck
picked a
of
peck of
pickled
pickled
peppers.
peppers.
Again.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Good. Again.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Yeah, so the
Peter
trickiest section is the pickled peppers. So let's just say those two words together 5 times. So pickled
pickled
peppers,
peppers.
pickled
Pickled
peppers, pickled
peppers.
peppers,
Pickled
pickled
peppers. Pickled
peppers,
peppers.
pickled
Pickled
peppers. Yeah.
peppers.
Now let's do of pickled peppers 5 times.
Of pickled peppers. Of pickled peppers. Of pickled peppers. Of pickled peppers. Of pickled peppers.
Yes. Now let's try peck of pickled peppers.
Peck of pickled peppers. Peck of pickled peppers. Peck of pickled peppers. Peck of pickled peppers. Peck of pickled peppers.
Good. Now let's try a peck of pickled peppers.
A peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers.
Great. Now, picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Picked a peck of pickled peppers. Picked a peck of pickled peppers. Picked a peck of pickled peppers. Picked a peck of pickled peppers. Picked a peck of pickled peppers.
All right.
Picked
Now,
a peck of pickled peppers.
yes. So now Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Good. Yes. So I think the beginning of the sentence we can do a little bit faster, but then when we get to the end, we have to slow it down a little bit. So you could try
Yep.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Yeah, and I actually do that in my everyday speech as well. So if there is a section that's more common to hear and say, I might say that part faster. And then if there is a word or a phrase that would be unusual or a bit tricky, more complex, I might slow down for that. Another reason I might slow down is if it's a name of something or something really essentially important that I need them to hear. So I'm talking really fast, but then maybe I say a title of something and slow it way down. So I say, hey, when you run to the grocery store, would you mind picking up this brand of this kind of food? And then I slow it down because I need Annie's Easter Bunny macaroni, right? Maybe I have a really picky child, and so I need this particular kind, right? Or maybe someone has food allergies, and so they need, this brand of this kind of frozen pizza, right? So I would slow down on that section to make it more clear. So that's actually something that you can use in life as well. You say, okay, this particular part is really important, or maybe it's complex or tricky to understand. So if you were doing a presentation and teaching people about this medical thing that you've been researching, and you want to be sure that they understand this particular section because it's all brand new research, then maybe you slow down for that. But as you're talking about maybe review or some basic things that probably they understand, you can speak faster. So that's a technique that you could actually use. But we're using it here because it's tricky to say. So you can use it for that reason as well. But then there are other reasons it might work well in life too. All right. So the next one we're trying is working on the SH sound and the S sound. S, sh, sh. They are very different, I think, in the way that we create them. Right? I feel the air hissing through underneath these top teeth with that tongue, with the S, and then shh. It's much more rounded. Shh. My tongue is in a very different shape for that one. Shh. Right? So I feel like they're pretty different. And with you, we worked a lot on the lip rounding early on, that lip rounding and the pucker. So I think the best thing for you to think about is that lip shape changing so drastically between the two. So this one is she sells seashells
She sells seashells
by the seashore.
by the she by the seashore.
Yes.
She
We also
sells
have a couple
seashells
Z's
by
in
the
there too.
seashore.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
She
So
sells seashells by the seashore.
hmm she sells seashells by the seashore.
She sells seashells by the seashore.
Good. So then I like to say it rhythmically and then speed it up. She sells seashells by the seashore.
She sells seashells by the seashore.
Yep. And then we're going to speed it up gradually. So let's try it together. She sells
She sells
seashells by the
seashells by
seashore. A
the
little faster.
seashore.
She sells
She sells
seashells by the
seashells by the
seashore.
seashore.
She sells
She sells
seashells by the
seashells by the
seashore.
seashore.
She sells
She sells
seashells by the
seashells by the
seashore.
seashore.
She sells
She
seashells
sells
by the
seashells by
seashore.
the seashore.
She sells
She
seashells
sells
by the
seashells by
seashore.
the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells
sells
by the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells
sells
by the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells.
sells
Oh, I
seashells by
flubbed
the
up. So you
seashore.
find the point where you flub it up, right? So let's try that speed again. She sells
She
seashells by
sells
the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells by
sells
the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells by
sells
the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She
seashore.
sells
She
seashells by
sells
the
seashells
seashore.
by the
She sells
seashore.
seashells
She
by the
sells
seashore.
seashells by the
She sells
seashore.
seashells
She
by the
sells
seashore.
seashells by the
She sells
seashore. She
seashells by the
sells
seashore.
seashells by the
Right? And
seashore.
then you keep
She
going
sells.
faster and faster and faster, right? Until you fall off the rails. Yeah. So now try it just as fast as you can go. She sells seashells by the seashore, right?
She sells seashells by the seashore.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, exactly. So the problem with going too fast is we lose the inflection and expression. So that's part of why I sometimes will start kind of messing up the articulation because I keep trying to do that. And then I find the point where I'm like, oh, I can't keep it all. So when I'm going, she sells seashells by the seashore, I have lost any sort of expression, right? I have no more pitch variation or speed variation or accenting certain parts, right? She sells seashells by the seashore, right? I can't say it expressively anymore. So it's helpful for practicing for that clear articulation at the faster rate, but we kind of exaggerate it for the exercise. And then for real life, you're going to slow it down a little bit from there so that you can still be expressive and still be communicating with those expressive qualities. All right, so the next one is a fun one. I feel like it's one that just about every kid in America has learned. Um, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So this one's going to have a lot of the rounding and the W's, right? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So you're going to feel your lips doing the rounding and protruding quite often here. And then you also have quite a few of the ch 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 sounds and the k k k in the back as well. So you're going to feel the tongue movement there is going to be fun because we've also worked on the front of tongue movement and then shifting to more of a back lifted tongue placement. So this one will be a good one for you. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck?
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck?
If a woodchuck could chuck wood.
If a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Good.
How
How
much
much
wood
wood would a woodchuck
would a
chuck
woodchuck
if a
chuck if
woodchuck
a
could chuck
woodchuck could
wood?
chuck? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Yes, again.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Good. So let's take it at a slow, steady pace and we'll gradually speed it up. Let's try about how much wood, about that speed to start.
How
How much
much
wood
wood
would a
would a
woodchuck chuck
woodchuck
if a
chuck if a
woodchuck could
woodchuck
chuck
could
wood?
chuck?
How much
How
wood would
much
a
wood
woodchuck
would a
chuck if
woodchuck
a
chuck if
woodchuck
a
could chuck
woodchuck could
wood?
chuck?
Little faster. How much
How
wood would
much
a
wood would
woodchuck
a
chuck
woodchuck
if a
chuck if a
woodchuck could
woodchuck
chuck
could
wood?
chuck?
Little faster. How much
How
wood would a
much wood would
woodchuck
a
chuck if
woodchuck
a
chuck if
woodchuck
a
could chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could
Little
chuck wood?
faster. How much wood
How
would a
much wood
woodchuck
would a
chuck if a
woodchuck chuck
woodchuck
if a
could chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could
Little
chuck wood?
faster. How much wood
How
would a
much wood
woodchuck
would a
chuck if a
woodchuck chuck
woodchuck
if a
could chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could
Little
chuck wood?
faster. How much wood
How
would a
much wood
woodchuck chuck if a
chuck chuck
woodchuck
if a
could chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could chuck?
How much wood would a
How much
woodchuck
wood would
chuck
a
if a
woodchuck
woodchuck
chuck
could
if a
chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could chuck wood?
How much wood would a
How much
woodchuck
wood
chuck
would a
if a
woodchuck
woodchuck
chuck
could
if a
chuck
woodchuck
wood?
could chuck wood?
How much wood would a
How
woodchuck
much
chuck
wood
if
would
a
a woodchuck
woodchuck could
chuck
chuck
if a
wood?
woodchuck could chuck?
How much wood would a
How
woodchuck
much
chuck if
wood
a
would a
woodchuck
woodchuck
could
chuck
chuck
if a
wood?
woodchuck?
How much
I
wood would
get
a
it.
woodchuck chuck? Yeah, so you'll find the point that you're like, ooh, that's as fast as I can go. Good. So try it yourself as fast as you can go.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Yes, very good. Yes, that was excellent. Great, very good. Okay, so the next one again is going to be working on stop plosives, but instead of a P, we're working on the B instead. We also have a little bit of the L movement, and we also have a little bit of an R in there, which will be a nice challenge. We also have the K again. So you're going to have the G and the K are going to be moving the back of the tongue. The b is going to be popping the air through the lips. And we've got the R right at the end too, but the G and the K are going to feel that palate popping open. So I think that is probably going to be the trickiest part of it. All right, so this is a big black bug bit a big black bear.
A big black bug bit a big black bear.
Yes, good. Yeah. So the the L flick of the tongue to the k, right? Black, black. Can
Black,
you feel that quick tongue movement there?
black.
Black. So you've got
Yep,
lip movement, tongue movement,
black.
tongue movement. So lips, front tongue, back tongue. So that one I think is probably one of the trickiest words there.
Bow.
Black bear, black bear,
Black
black
bear.
bear.
Black bear. Black bear.
Yeah, I think early on that would have been
Bear.
tricky, but now it's so much easier. So I'm really excited to hear that. A big black bug bit a big black bear.
A big black bug bit a big black bear.
Good, a little faster.
A big black bug bit a big black bear.
Good, faster.
A big black bug bit a big black bear. A
Mm-hmm.
big black bug bit a big black bear. A
Yes.
big black bug bit a big black bear.
Yes, very good. Yes. Excellent work there. Yeah, so I think you'll probably hit a wall with how fast you can do black because that
Yep.
word in particular is a tricky one for you. So just keep that in mind. So the other words throughout, like a big bug bit a big, those are not as hard. So you could do those faster, like a big black bug bit a big black
It's a big
bear,
black
right? So
bear.
you could
A
probably
big
do
black
those
bug
faster
bit a
and then
big
take more
black
time
bear.
on black and bear.
Got it.
Yeah,
Big
just in
black bug,
life. Yeah.
black bear.
hmm Good. All right. So the next one we'll try is a flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Good. A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue. A
Yes. So
flea and a
you're doing
fly flew.
quite well with this one. The F, remember, is the same shape and the same air movement as a V, which has historically been really challenging for us. But the F hasn't been as hard as the V for some reason. So that's fun and nice. The L though comes right after it. So it's kind of like the equivalent of a VL, which would be really tricky. We're vibrating the vocal folds for that, but we don't have the vibration here. Flee, fly, flew. Try that.
Flea, fly, flew.
Yeah, yeah. So those historically, I think would have been a lot harder, but you're doing them really quite nicely right now. That's awesome. A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Good again.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Mm-hmm.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue. A
Yes.
flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Excellent.
A
Very
flea
good.
and a fly flew up in a flue.
Yep. Want to try it extra fast?
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue. A
Yes.
flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Yes. A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
A flea and a fly flew up in a flue.
Yeah. So can you feel there are a couple spots where you kind of have to stretch or slow for just a moment and then you go faster?
Like and.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
and, the D,
Mhm.
in order to get the D right, or else it just
Right.
becomes N, A-N,
Yeah, like
and.
and a fly. Yeah, you can kind of elide them together, but yes, to get that clear duh. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's great. I love that you figured that out and you go, okay, I need a little bit more time for that D sound. which is perfectly okay. So you have certain sounds that are trickier. We all have sounds that are trickier for us. And so in life and conversation, I will slow at certain points to take a little bit more time, and that's perfectly okay. That's great. All right, so we're going to try another now. A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
Yes, a happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
Yeah, I think probably the trickiest part is going to be that hopped and hiccuped.
Hopped and hiccuped.
Yep, because we've got the D's, we've got the K sound in there. Hopped and
Hiccup.
hiccuped.
A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped. A
Yes.
happy
Yeah, and I
hippo
think
hopped
it's kind of
and
like a
hiccuped.
danger zone with the D's there too. Yeah. A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
A happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
Yes, very
A
clear. Nice.
happy hippo hopped and hiccuped.
Mm-hmm.
A
Yes, and
happy hippo
also something
hopped
I
and
often find with this one is that
hop,
people will get lazy with the H's, but you are not. So I love that. Happy, hippo,
hop,
hopped,
hop.
hiccuped. I'm hearing a clear
But in this case,
aspiration.
both at the end of both hopped and hiccup, it's less D and more T.
Hopped, hopped, hopped. You're right. It's a little bit of a brighter D sound. Hopped
Got it.
and hiccuped. Yeah,
Hopped and before I forget, how do you pronounce interpret or
interpret,
interpreted? Interpret,
interpreted, interpret,
interpreted, interpret,
interpreted. Yeah, so the ter
interpret,
is the accent. Interpret,
interpreted,
interpreted. Hmm.
interpreted. Perfect.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there are some words that can go multiple
Interpret,
ways. Like
interpret.
we have some people in America who say insurance, and then we have some who say insurance, right? Um, I know someone from Wisconsin who says insurance. But then in the deep south and the Midwest, I usually hear insurance, right? So depending on where you're from, you might hear that differently. Like the Northeast, I think they say insurance usually. So there are certain words
Insurance.
that have multiple correct ways of saying it, like Appalachian, Appalachian. They're both actually correct, but interpreted, that would be one that
Interpreted,
is a standard way of saying it. So it's not
interpreted.
a trick question. Yeah. Great. All right. So then we're going to try a noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
A noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
Good. This is another good one to exercise that palate because on the ends, the palate comes down and the tongue pulls up to close and send the air through the sinus passage. And then we pop it open for the vowels, right? So try to feel for that because this is an exercise that will also help with your K's and G sounds. A noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
A noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
Yes.
A
And something else
noisy
I'd
noise, a
add
noise,
is
an
a little
oyster.
glottal strike on a noise and oyster so that we hear that those words
Oyster.
clearly start without a consonant sound. They start with the vowel. A noisy noise, a noise, an oyster. So you add a little like extra puff of air, a glottal strike on
A
those.
noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
Yes, that's much more clear to me. I think if we said it really relaxed and casually, a noise and oyster. We can kind of glide it
Noise,
all
an oyster.
together, and
A
it's not as
noisy noise,
clear.
a noise, an
A
oyster.
noise, an oyster. A
A
noisy
noise,
noise, a noise, an oyster.
a noisy noise, a noise, an oyster.
Yes, very good.
A
Yeah, so a
noisy
general
noise, a
rule would
noise, an
be
oyster.
when you have a word that starts in a vowel, we add that little glottal strike, and that's going to make it more clean and clear to the listener. Like
Noise, an
octopus,
oyster.
apple, orange juice,
Apple,
ice cream, eagle.
a
Those
noise,
are
an
words that
oyster,
start in a vowel. So we're going to add that
an
little glottal
oyster,
strike.
a
So just a
noise, an
general rule
oyster,
for that.
a
Good.
noisy noise, a noise, an oyster,
Beautiful. Yes. Good. Try saying it really fast. A noisy
a
noise, a noise,
noisy
an
noise, a
oyster.
noise, an oyster,
Yeah.
a noisy noise, a noise, an oyster, a
Yes.
noisy
Good.
noise, a noise, an oyster.
Yeah. And the faster we go, we're going to lose that glottal strike because it's almost like a slight like lift and then accent on it. So the faster we go, we kind of lose the inflection, we lose that. So you'll hit a point where you go, I can say it faster, but I probably shouldn't at that point. So you'll find that. All right, so let's try a proper copper coffee pot.
A proper copper coffee pot. A
Yes, this has quite
proper
a few tricky
copper
sounds, the
coffee.
R's, the K, the F, right? So a proper copper coffee pot.
A proper copper coffee pot. A
Yes.
proper copper coffee pot. A
Yes.
proper copper coffee pot.
Excellent. Faster.
A proper copper coffee pot.
Good. So
A
we kind
proper
of went,
copper
ooh,
coffee pot.
yes.
A
A
proper
proper
copper coffee
copper
pot.
coffee pot. Let's try it rhythmically and we'll
A,
speed it up. A
a
proper
proper
copper
copper
copper. No, see,
coffee.
now I messed it up. I was thinking about the rhythm. Again, here we
A,
go. A proper
a
copper
proper copper
pot. A
coffee pot.
proper copper
Proper
coffee
copper
pot. A
coffee pot.
proper
A
copper
proper
coffee
copper
pot. A
coffee pot.
proper
A
copper
proper
coffee
copper
pot. A
coffee
proper
pot. A
copper
proper
coffee pot.
copper
A
coffee
proper
pot.
copper
A
coffee pot.
proper
A
copper
proper
coffee
copper
pot.
coffee
A
pot.
proper
A proper
copper
copper
coffee.
coffee pot. A
Proper
proper
copper
copper
coffee
coffee
pot.
pot. A
I
proper
can't.
copper. Yeah,
A
it's we get to that point, and it's tricky too because we have to
proper
do a
copper
little
coffee
with
pot.
that rhythm. We're
Coffee
doing
pot.
this quick little catch breath, and so a
Yep.
little quick release breath there. So we didn't have much time to like pause between either. So just try randomly, really fast. A proper copper
A
coffee
proper
pot.
copper coffee pot. A proper copper coffee pot. A proper
So on
copper coffee
copper
pot.
is where I hear that you need a little bit more time. Copper, copper, copper,
Copper.
copper, copper,
Copper.
copper, copper.
Copper. Copper.
Yeah.
Copper.
And then
Copper.
I
A
probably
proper
do
copper coffee
proper
pot.
copper, proper copper,
Proper
proper
copper.
copper.
Proper copper. Proper copper. Proper copper. A proper copper coffee pot.
Yes, yeah. So when you find that
Proper
spot that
copper.
you're hesitating or taking more time, slow it down, focus on just that word and then the words connected to it, and then expand it to the full phrase, and then you'll smooth it out. A proper copper coffee pot,
A proper copper coffee pot.
and faster.
A proper copper coffee pot. A proper copper coffee pot. A proper copper coffee pot. A proper copper coffee pot.
Yeah, I heard in the second to last a slight hesitation on copper. So that still is probably the trickiest part of the phrase, but that's all right. We find those spots, we go, oh, that's the tricky spot. And then we practice them extra, right? So we did 8 different tongue twisters today. That's pretty good. And you got all of them to where they were moving very quickly and much better. Last time we worked a little bit more on the THs, the Vs, the Ws. So I tried to mix in some other sounds like with the combinations with the Ks and Gs and Ls. We experimented with some other sounds. I think adding in more Rs might be a good thing to do when we meet on Monday. So we've got a lot of good sounds that we were working on today, and we did still have some with the how much wood one. So we did quite a few good exercises there, and we'll just keep challenging you in new ways. So I do think that because we've been focused so much on the individual sounds, like I was saying at the beginning, mixing in some others now is a really good idea because would we have thought that copper would have been that tricky in the context, right? I don't know that that's a word we would have necessarily isolated and said, oh, that word would be tricky, right? We've worked more on like waving, right? Things like that with the W's, the V's, but copper, I guess with the K and the R, it does make sense that that one's a little bit tricky. But I don't know that that's one that we would have really focused in on or found. So by doing the tongue twister, we found that word. So I'm really excited that we're trying some different phrases and combinations because we'll find those things that we go, ooh, that was tricky. I didn't maybe expect that. So really nice work today, Robin. I loved how you started slow, you sped up slowly, and then we were able to find those little parts and then focus in on those and then expand it to the full phrase again. That's a really great way to be practicing. So I want you to keep practicing like that yourself in your own time, okay?
All right, thank you.
Nice work today, Robin. Okay, I'll see you Monday. Have a good weekend.
See you
Bye-bye.
Monday.